All right. So we are rolling. I know that there's been some hardcore supply chain geeks who have been on the phone with us all day. So thank you to you folks who have made it this far. You are true champions for being on a Zoom call this long. But we have two final sessions, and I think they're two of the best. So I want to welcome Greg and Sam from Ivanti Wavelink. Greg Henry, our VP of Client Solutions at Barcoding, and you guys are going to take it away at this point, as they say. So I'll let you guys chat, and then I'll be back for our Innovator of the Year award announcement.
Great, thanks. Thanks for everybody out there. It's been a long day, I'm sure, but hopefully you'll get a little bit out of what Sam and I are going to talk about. My name is Greg Henry. I'm the Vice President of Client Solutions for Barcoding. Been in the industry about 30 years. Been barcoding coming up on 3 now. And with me is Sam Gonzalez with Ivanti/Wavelink. Sam, give them a little bit on you.
Yeah, so thank you, Greg. I am the Director of Global Systems and Solutions, so I run our global technical sales team. But I wanted to touch on a little bit, actually, how I started my career with Ivanti Wavelink at the time, just Wavelink. I actually started my career as a voice implementer, implementing our Speakeasy product. So the topic that we're covering today is one that's kind of near and dear to my heart. I spent a number of years in warehouses implementing voice and dealing with the challenges and working directly with the end users. And so I'm really happy to be here talking about voice today.
Awesome, perfect. So the topic, as you know, is about voice. What does voice mean in the supply chain? For the new geeks out there, voice might be something you've just come across, but the reality is voice has been out as an option for a long, long time. And while it's conceptually the same, it's voice, the technology is significantly advanced, and that's what we really want to focus on today. So Sam, since you're the expert, you've lived this, so to speak, why should customers really be looking at voice now?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a question that we get a lot, right? There's, as you pointed out, voice has been out in the market for a while. So, what makes now a good time to look at it versus maybe waiting a little bit longer or, for people who haven't adopted it already? Well, one of the things that we're finding is as we talk to our customers that we've done voice projects with, is that the people that had adopted voice have actually found themselves in an interesting position. As we all know, we're in a time where business has changed dramatically in a period of a few months. For some people, that meant, unfortunately, reduction in workforce while still having to maintain high standards and get product out the door. For others, it meant an increase in workload, especially for those who are dealing with any sort of medical product or groceries. And those customers that we have that implemented voice have been able to adjust to the changes better than those who hadn't. And the reason is because voice brings with it a lot of productivity, a lot of accuracy gains, the ability to train and bring people on board very quickly. And so it really just put them in a position where they were much better to adapt. Now, obviously, for people who didn't adopt before COVID hit, now we're already kind of in the middle of this. But what I'm telling people is that now is a really good time to look at the technology because we don't know what's going to be the next disruptive thing in our industry. And by being an earlier adopter of technology in general, you can better position yourself to be able to handle the unexpected.
Awesome. Yes, no, totally agree. So voice has been around a long time. It's not necessarily new, but it is new when we talk about, new operating systems. Most of the day we've talked about Android, but you guys also support Windows 10. What can you tell us about how the market has changed when it comes to customers implementing voice on either an Android device or, for that matter, a Windows 10 tablet?
Yeah, so what a lot of people may not realize is that, voice has been used in the warehouses for a very, very long time. As I mentioned, I got my start in my career with Wavelink about 10 years ago doing voice implementations. That's when we started doing voice in the warehouse. Actually, we started closer to 15 years ago. And then there's companies that have been in the market for probably closer to 20 plus years. It's a technology that's been around, but it's a technology that's changing and advancing at a really rapid rate. So just to give you a little bit of history, in the early days of voice, it was really, really difficult to get it to work on a device because devices were really underpowered. The operating systems weren't really built to handle it. The processors, the memory couldn't really handle it. So there's really only one way to get it to work, and that was to basically put a big beefy server in the middle that would take all of the voice and do the actual, computing and crunching on it to come up with a response. And for a long time, these systems worked really, really well, right? It fit the need, it fixed the problem that was there. But what we're finding is that as we get into this Android, Windows 10 world, the devices that are built for these operating systems are vastly more capable than the ones we used to deal with. We have tons of processor capability, we have tons of memory. And then in addition to that, voice technology itself has come a long way. We may have been using voice in the warehouse 20 years ago, but you certainly weren't using it on your mobile phone. And you certainly didn't have a digital assistant sitting in your house that you could ask questions to. So the other thing that we're finding is as voice becomes more mainstream, the technology is growing at an exponential rate. So people no longer have to do it the legacy way. They don't have to install big bulky servers or use proprietary hardware. We're able to, and full disclosure, this is how my company tackles the problem. This is how we do it with our Speakeasy product, is that we do all of our processing 100% on the device. We chose to take the route of leveraging the power that's available on these more modern devices to get quicker response times. And now that the devices are capable enough, we can do this all without sacrificing any performance or accuracy. Because let's face it, the mobile devices that you get today probably have almost as much processing power as the servers we were installing 20 years ago, if not more.
I was going to say more, yeah, for sure, right? Well, what does that also mean? It really means, I presume it's faster to deploy voice now than it was even 5 years ago, as far as, configuring it for your system.
Yeah.
And I would assume, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, that getting rid of that server actually reduces the amount of support you need because there's less stuff to maintain.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the big benefit is it gives us a lot of flexibility, right? It is hard to get a server up and running. It takes a lot of time. It is also, as you pointed out, a big support burden. And it also becomes another single point of failure, right?
Okay.
You already have your WMS server. If that goes down, that's bad news for anybody. But then you put another server in the middle, well, that's one more point that can fail. One of the other big benefits of running everything on the device is that when it comes time to do a proof of concept or a test, you just load it up on a couple of devices and put it out on the floor. It's not going to disrupt what everybody else is doing. It's not going to throw a wrench into things. And if that device goes down, if there's a problem with that device, that's only one device that goes down. All of the devices run completely independently from a voice perspective, even though they're connecting to the same system. And you can have somebody running voice in the aisle right next to somebody that's running the traditional way, just using keyed input, and they're not going to interfere with each other.
Yeah, that's brilliant. It just occurred to me when we're talking about voice, some folks, if they're new to it, they might not really understand the difference between using voice as a input technology and calling somebody on the telephone, right? So we're not talking about talking to another individual. We're using voice commands to replace a barcode scanner, to replace a keyboard, to replace a touch screen. Just occurred to me we ought to make sure we clarify that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good call out. And maybe I can give a little bit of background. Again, all those years implementing voice, I can touch on the purpose for it. So yeah, to Greg's point, this is about, interacting with the device via your voice, not somebody else. And what we look at when we implement a voice solution is really where is all the wasted time in a transaction. And it's really easy to see in your own environment. If you just go out on the floor, picking, for example, you go watch somebody pick for a while, watch for any time they look at the screen, and you're going to notice something. Whenever a user looks at the screen, their feet stop moving. They're no longer progressing down their pick path. They stop, they look. They're not moving products. They're not moving through the flow. And so, that may only be a fraction of a second, but start watching and you'll be amazed at how many times people stop to look to validate information. The other thing you're going to find is that anytime somebody has to key something in, again, you're stopping, you're looking, you're focused only on that device, and no product is being moved. So a voice process that is properly implemented will have no stop in movement. The goal when we go in there is to make sure that from the moment you start moving towards that product to the moment you complete your pick or your pull or your cycle count, whatever it is that you're never taking an action that doesn't involve either moving you or moving the product. And so with a good voice flow, you'll be able to watch people and, the system tells you where to go in your ear and you're moving. And if you forget, you just ask, but you keep moving and it will tell you as you're going. When you get there, let's say it tells you to pick 10 items. As you're moving the items into your cart, you can say 10 confirmed or 10 ready or whatever the verbiage is. So you're doing simultaneous actions. You're both confirming with the system what you've done, but you're also moving product. So that becomes a zero loss in productivity because you're doing all of your system inputs while actually moving product. And that's really where the overall productivity gain comes from voice. Those little fractions of a second, I always told people this when we went and implemented it, is we don't deal in terms of hours or minutes, we deal with fractions of a second. But when you remove enough fractions of a second from a process, times that by the number of picks per day, times that by the number of users in a warehouse, times that by the number of warehouses in an organization, it adds up to some really impressive productivity gains.
Yeah, killer. All right. So it sounds like voice is a no-brainer. Sounds like, hey, this is the thing we should all be seriously looking at. Let's talk about what are some of the barriers to implementing voice.
Yeah, so I've talked to a lot of customers about voice, and the things that come up most commonly are, well, one is cost. And a lot of people have this perception that voice is very, very expensive. And I know exactly where that's coming from. It is coming from those systems that I talked about, right? Those legacy voice systems have a very, very thick architecture. So there is servers that have to be bought and maintained, and there is proprietary devices that are designed to be able to collect the input, both when it comes to headsets and devices. And all of those proprietary components can be very, very, very expensive. And so even though you can get a good ROI, the cost of entry has traditionally been very high. Well, luckily with the change in technology, which is true of most technologies, right? As technology advances, it becomes more accessible and it becomes less expensive. So as that dynamic has shifted and as more modern voice technologies are starting to leverage the devices, a couple of really interesting things have happened. First of all, the cost, there's no cost in servers. So that line item gets scratched out right away. It's just gone. The other thing that happens is now you have a larger choice of devices, right? You can shop around. You can buy a Zebra device, a Honeywell device, whatever device that you want to get that fits your needs. That's a good voice capable device. And so you have your options. And then you also are then left with a device that is not just a voice device. If you unplug the headset, it doesn't immediately become a brick or a paperweight. You can go take that same device and go use it to do another process in the warehouse. You can go scan barcodes, you can use that screen. And so that allows you to leverage your assets more efficiently. You don't have to necessarily buy so many duplicates if you know that, okay, when we have high peaks in picking, because we're trying to get things out the door, go use it as a voice device. Maybe later on when we're doing cycle count, we'll take those same devices, we'll give them to the cycle counters and let them go cycle count the way that they always do. So it just gives you a lot more flexibility with your investments. And then again, just the other thing is the technology and the way that we implement it has changed a lot over the years as well. So, voice used to be a very professional services heavy, expensive process, but as the technology has changed, we've been able to bring that down dramatically.
Very good. So kind of leveraging that, let's talk about user training. How involved is it? Is it, learning the vocabulary, understanding how to talk to a device? Do I have to train devices now for every single user? Can you just talk to what's the training experience like?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I think that is another good potential barrier that people see sometimes with implementing voice is getting your workforce trained up is viewed as being hard. Again, going back to the history of voice, the traditional voice systems, and for anybody that's implemented one before or seen one may be familiar with this process, but they had this process of voice training. And so the concept is I, as a user, before ever using the voice system at all, would go sit down in a chair, put on a headset, and then I would listen as the system asked me to say every single word that I may possibly say during the process twice. So it would literally be something like this. The system would say one. I'd say one. Repeat one. Well, it gets pretty tedious by the time you get up to 200, 300, or whatever it is that you need to do in your system. And so this can be a long process. It can take potentially hours to do. But what it allowed the system to do is to learn your voice. Now it knows how you talk and it can understand you, which is great, until you go out with your buddies and you go to a concert and maybe you get a little too rowdy, and you come in, you're a little bit hoarse the next day. Well, now you sound different and the system doesn't understand you anymore. So that means you've got to sit down and you've got to go through that process again just to train it for how you're talking for today, because you threw your voice out a little bit. And so that was another big barrier. But again, the technology has advanced dramatically, right? Nobody has to train Google how they speak or Siri how they speak or Alexa. The technology's gotten better. And we've moved to what we call a speaker independent model. And that's a model where there's no more training necessary. The system is smart enough to figure it out. It doesn't care about the little differences between how people say words. It's able to figure it out. And people say to me sometimes, they say, oh, well, Sam, but sometimes Siri gets me wrong, right? I ask for the nearest pizza place and it tries to send me to an optometrist or something like that, which is true, but the technology for voice recognition, we're leveraging that, but we're also doing it a little bit differently, right? When you talk to a Google or a Siri, you literally could say anything, any words, any length. It has no idea what's going to come out of your mouth. And so it has to account for basically the entire language when it does that. When we're in a warehouse environment, we narrow the focus a little bit, right? So we know you're in a picking task, and within that task, you're at this specific step. Okay, well, what's the user going to say during this step? And so we basically give the system a list of words that it cares about, and those are all the words that it's listening to. And so that brings the recognition rate up drastically. If you try to ask Speakeasy, our voice product, where the nearest pizza place is, it's going to ignore you because it doesn't care. It is laser focused on the task at hand. And then there was actually one other thing I wanted to touch on, Greg, before I pass it back. There is one other barrier that I was thinking about when it comes to voice. This is one we hear a lot. A lot of people would like to try out voice. They'd like to see how it's going to work. It's great for me to say, sit here and say, oh yeah, it's going to recognize you great. You can hand the headset to everybody. But most people want to get their hands on it, right? They want to try out the technology. They want to get a feel for it. And that's traditionally been a really big barrier when it comes to voice, because again, I know I'm talking a lot about legacy voice systems, but I think it's good to understand where we're coming from because it helps understand where we've kind of evolved to. But with those systems, it was really difficult because you can imagine if you want to demo a system that has a big, thick server, well, somebody's got to come set up a server, or they got to bring a really beefy laptop onto your site so that they can use as a proxy server. And they've got to run a very, very thick demo environment. And so it can be a pretty big process. I've heard customers say it took months just before they could put a headset on and have a user go actually try the voice technology. And so one of the things that we've done is, in addition to the fact that we don't have those server components, we looked at it and we said, you know what? It's still too hard to try voice technology because generally it involves some level of customization. And so the way that we've tackled that is we've actually released what we're referring to as Rapid Voice. And it's basically just a website you can go to. It's rapid.avanti.com. And you can answer a few simple questions. So it'll say things like, what device are you using? What warehouse management system software are you using? If you are already using one of our products, not with voice, it'll give you the option to upload your configuration file so we can port over scanner settings and things like that. And at the end of that, you have an option. It can either give you a canned voice demo that you can go load on any device. In fact, if it's a Zebra or Honeywell, it'll even give you a barcode that you can scan, and it will load our software, the configuration, everything you need for your voice demo. Or you can say you want to try it live, and it will actually, using our rapid voice technology, you'll be able to go point it out in your system to your actual WMS system, and it will automatically pick out the information on the screen that it thinks is the most important information and speak it to you. And it will also load up the most common voice commands for the process that you're doing and allow you to speak back to it. Now, I'm not saying anybody's going to go to production with that. That's not the intention of it. But the idea is it's a really quick proof of concept. You can, within an hour, go out on the floor and actually move some product using voice. You can pull over some workers and say, try this on, let's see how it recognizes you. How do you understand it? Do you like the way the voice sounds? And so it becomes a really quick, easy way to get the technology into people's hands.
No, and that's huge. I mean, I'm not from Missouri, but I am a show me state kind of guy. And so I get it. Showing a customer or a prospect or a user how this thing can actually work is always moves the ball much faster down the field, right? Yep. To that, a couple things we were talking a lot about the past. When I was out in the field in my younger days, I always focused on the user. And the two things that always bothered me about voice in the early days were headsets were cables, and you had backpacks with processors in them, and there was a lot of stuff to carry around. Now we've got Bluetooth headsets talking to a single handheld, right? So all of those user encumbrances are gone, which is great. And one thing I want to point out with your product, as well as many of the others, is that the vocabulary is flexible, right? You can call it an item number, a part number, a SKU, whatever your vocabulary is as a user, that can be programmed into the device. So you don't have to go to your user community and teach them a new vocabulary. True statement?
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things that we do early on in the process when we go live with an implementation is we will sit down with the customer and learn their local vocabulary or vernacular, right? Every warehouse you could be part of the same company using the same WMS system, but maybe at this facility they call it one thing and somewhere else they call it something else.
Right.
It becomes almost a cultural thing. And so we'll sit down and say, yeah, what do you call this? Do you like this? Should we change this? Should we have more than one way of saying the same thing? We can support, maybe some users say it this way, some users use a different term. We can support both. And so it's very flexible in that way. You can do that. And then from the hardware side, when you were talking, it reminded me there used to be a product out there, this is a very long time ago, a wearable from Zebra that I can't remember if it was actually called a Gladiator or nicknamed a Gladiator.
Oh, glad nicknamed.
But the reason for it was a wearable that went on your arm. There were wires that came up and down the other side to a scanner on this hand. And again, this was a very long time ago. So the Bluetooth technology was not where it is today. And then there was wires coming up to a headset. So they called it the Gladiator because by the time you suited up, you looked like you were ready to go to war.
Right.
And so, yeah, we've come a long way from those days. Nowadays, we have small Bluetooth scanners that fit on the ring finger. We have Bluetooth headsets that are light and comfortable. And I've actually been to a number of facilities where people choose not to even carry the device with them. It used to be strapped on a pouch or strapped on an arm. I've seen scenarios where people use mounts to mount it to a cart or leave it in the forklift. And then the Bluetooth range is such that you can just have it mounted in the forklift, for example, hop on and off, do your voice picking, hop on. You never even have to carry or touch the device.
Right. Beautiful. No, good input. I guess one other thing to mention is because we are language independent, supporting multi-language is no big deal as well. So if you got multi-language individuals in your facility or across the country or across the world, the product will speak in whatever language your folks speak in.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, currently we support, I think, 27 different languages. And even within the languages, we support different dialects. So for example, you've got French for people who are in France, but then you've also got French for people in Quebec. There's a little bit different dialect, and people want to hear it the way that they're used to hearing it. So both in text to speech, the system speaking to you, and speech to text, you speaking back, we support different models. And the other thing that we get requested a lot, and this actually is a really big impact to accuracy, is maybe you have a WMS system that's only presented to you in English, but you have English and Spanish native speakers in your warehouse. That can be a big accuracy problem because nobody's going to be more accurate in the secondary language than they are in their primary language. Well, just because your system is based in English, that doesn't mean we can't change that and prompt them in Spanish and expect responses in Spanish, but just send, you know, the responses back the way the system's doing it. So for a lot of our customers, we can actually provide a translation service where we can say, yeah, we can support both languages, present everything in the customer's native language, even if your WMS doesn't support that.
Brilliant. Good transition to WMS. So most of our customers have 5, 10, 15, 20 years invested in their WMS system. They've got tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars. They don't want to touch it, right? That's the forbidden fruit is you can use any technology you want as long as I don't have to touch my WMS. What if any, the requirements does voice put on a WMS system?
Yeah, so from our perspective, all that we really care about is that it's either a telnet-based WMS system or it is a web-based WMS system. So we don't make any changes to the backend system. Now, some of the older technology, again, since it was server-based, the way that it would work is they would have direct kind of these clunky integrations into the WMS systems, which work fine, but the big limitation to it is that means that, oh, you have to be on the right version, right? You have to be on the right version of WMS in order to get that integration. And if you're not, well, then your only choice is to upgrade, and that may be cost prohibitive, and that just kills the entire voice project. The other thing that does, if you want to make changes to your voice process, then that's also very, very clunky and very expensive to do. And so what that led to is really what would happen is these voice providers would generally pick whatever they deem to be the most bang for their buck, which is usually a picking process and maybe a put away process. And they'd say, okay, well, these are the processes we support because it's very expensive to support other things. And so people only really use voice for those processes. Well, and now that things have changed, now that we have more modern technology and we're just layering on the device, we basically can interpret the screens as they come in, voice that information or the important information to the user, take what the user says, turn that right back into keyboard input or web calls or whatever the backend system is expecting and send it. So what that's allowed us to do is to kind of step outside that box. So not only can we support any version of WMS, I mean, we've implemented voice on WMS instances that are 20 plus years old, 25 plus years old. We've implemented on homegrown AS400 solutions that, you know, there's only one instance of it in the world at this warehouse because some guy that hasn't worked there for 15 years ago built it. And not only do they not want to change it, but quite frankly, nobody knows how. Right. But we can also step outside those traditional processes. So what usually happens is, yeah, people will start with picking because it is a high volume transaction. And so you get a lot of ROI on that. But once they get voice in the warehouse, they start thinking, well, wait a minute, could we use it over here in cycle count? Could we use it in put away? Could we use it in replenishment? And the cost to add those modules is very, very, very low. And so now they can start expanding it and rolling it out and taking those same devices, those same headsets and those same licenses and start leveraging them in new and creative ways that they never could before.
Right. Awesome. No, and it's interesting because we do associate voice a lot with warehouse, but we're beginning to see it go into field applications, inspections as an example.
Yep.
There is no limitation to where voice fits. And with that, I see Jody popping up, which means we must be running out of time. So let me ask you the final question. it's all COVID world right now, I'm sure. And you watch the news, all you see is masks, masks, masks. What effect, if any, does a mask have on voice?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And actually, this has come up a lot because people are genuinely concerned about it. But at the end of the day, and I'll be honest, this isn't really unique to our voice recognition system. For really any enterprise level voice system out there, masks are not going to interrupt the recognition. So we've personally tested ours very extensively with face masks, and we have not noticed any drop in accuracy. If anything, it actually has a weird side effect of being a bit of a windscreen. One of the biggest problems you have with voice is people putting it too close to their mouth and breathing on it. I'm sure everybody's tried to talk to somebody on a cell phone when it's really windy outside.
Right.
Really hard to tell what's going on. So it actually, if anything, just provides a little bit more of a windscreen. So yes, for people that are providing or requiring face masks in their facility, no worries, your voice product's going to keep working.
Beautiful. Well, Sam, thank you so much. This was great information. Love your experience, your knowledge. Thanks for sharing. Jody, to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Greg. You guys were fantastic. You can feel free to hop off the camera now.